fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts.
Several shots were fired as President Kennedy's motorcade passed through downtown Dallas.
None of us will ever forget this day. Yet we go forward to defend freedom and all that is good and just in our world.
This is Houston. Say again, please.
Houston, we've had a problem.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
I have a dream. My four little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
Welcome to the Hagmann Daily Show, weekdays 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And now your hosts, Joe Hagmann and Jon Robberson.
Hello and welcome everyone to this Wednesday, January 3rd, 2018 edition of the Hagmann Daily Show. Now, just like everybody else, got to get used to saying 2018. You say 20, you do the radio broadcast every day almost, except weekends, most weekends for a year, saying the year 2017 over and over and over again for 300 plus times, and then you switch the year, and here you go, gunning to get used to saying 2018. I know it seems like a little thing, but I know a lot of people struggle with that. If you haven't noticed, around for the first week, maybe few weeks of the year. But anyway, we got a lot of great stuff to get into today. We're going to be talking about a whole bunch of things, from what is going on in Iran. We have some updates there. To first and foremost, what I want to talk about is the Twitter storm that Trump has created. Watching the mainstream media continue to go on their deranged lunatic rantings of madmen that they are, and it is so funny to watch. I was really this morning watching CNN. Just I don't know, I was in some weird mood. I was enjoying watching these people foam and froth at the mouth, and everything that they attacked Trump from, it just made me laugh even more. From this worrying about the size of the nuclear button and his small hands, to his manhood issues, to just on and on and on, him being deranged, and he's going to start a nuclear war with his Twitter comments and blah 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 blah. It's so funny to watch some days.
Okay, first of all, greetings everyone. Thanks for checking in with us today on the third day of 2018. And Joe, I'm with you. I've been making notes on my hand the last couple of days, so that gives you an idea of how on the ball I am. But I didn't realize, Joe, that President Donald Trump had manhood issues. Did you have prior knowledge of this?
Well, only what the media has told me. Apparently, he not only has manhood issues, but he has some kind of phobia about his small hands. I don't know if you've ever saw It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
We've watched it together a couple times. It's really funny.
On that show, there's a character named Charlie, and he has an Uncle Jack who's a lawyer. And this character he plays, he's a child molester, but he always is worried about his tiny hands, and it's just so funny to hear them when they talk about this, because they make an issue of this stuff. I don't think Trump's ever said anything about his hands or said his hands were small. This is the media, but this is the stuff. It's not about his hands. This is the stuff that they're going after him today. Morning Joe even suggested Trump's nuclear button tweet suggests president is demented and deranged. On the set of Morning Joe, no one was pleased by Trump's latest Twitter barb thrown at North Korea over the size of the country's nuclear buttons. And the host and panel on Morning Joe, from Brzezinski to Morning Joe, they go on to talk about. Oh, I'm sorry, it wasn't Morning Joe. It was Morning Joe, but it wasn't Joe Scarborough, apparently. But he did tweet out some things about this. But this is what was going on CNN all night last night and all day today. All they can keep talking about is the tweet that Trump put out, saying that in response to Kim Jong-un saying that he has a nuclear button on his desk at all times, Trump said, someone from his depleted and food-starved regime please inform him that I too have a nuclear button, but it is much bigger and more powerful one than his, and my button works. So this has the media just in a frenzy, and it's so fun to watch. I don't have a problem with what he said, John. I don't know if you do, but I think it's funny, and I like, the president is giving it to everybody straight. He's not pretending to be something. He's not, blurring the lines of his statements through, being cryptic. He's putting it out there, and that's what the American people voted him in for.
Indeed. I received an interesting email this morning, and I'm not going to read all of it, but this is from a listener who checked in with Hagmann Report last night. His first name is Jeffrey, and we'll leave it at that. But he made an interesting, he noted something interesting. Many of our listeners probably are familiar with Mark Taylor. He's the retired firefighter. I figured out who he was on True News several years ago, who claims to have had a number of God-inspired or prophetic visions and dreams about a future President Donald Trump. Now, Joe, this is back in probably 2011.
Yeah, he came out with a dream back in 2011, 2012, where he talked about Trump was the president standing on the Truman balcony and an eagle was shot, I believe. So, is that the same?
No,
okay.
I remember that one. That's a different guy, and he was also on True News. And frankly, I knew his name a year or two ago, but it escapes me. Mark Taylor, Joe, I'm sure you've heard this because it was a little strange metaphorically. He had a dream about some of the big famous horse races in this country. That was one of them I remember. It was like the Kentucky Derby and one other one. I'm not a horse racing fan, so I'm ignorant on the topic. But he, in the dream, the implication, and it was a very fascinating interview with Rick Wiles over at True News, TrueNews.com. But at the end of the day, Mark Taylor prophesied the following. Now I'm going to read directly from this email from Jeffrey, and I'll keep it brief. Quote, Mark Taylor has prophesied the election of President Trump in 2011. He prophesied that Trump would be impervious to criticism, that it would be like water off a duck's back. Mark warns that the devil is trying to change our DNA by getting Christians to speak the prophecies of the devil and not the prophecies of God. He has warned us to only speak of victory and not defeat. We have prayed that God will hear from heaven and heal our lands. If we have turned from our wicked ways, called out to him, then we are to speak and act as though our prayers have been answered. Now, I'll stop there. It's a fascinating email, but for time's sake, I'll stop there. Joe, I think that the majority of Christians in America, and probably almost the entire remnant body here in the United States, feels that the respite provided by President Trump is nothing short of a miracle. When I spoke with my dad the day after the election last November, 2 Novembers ago now, the first thing out of his mouth, he was like, I am just enjoying the day. This has been an incredible miracle. And so I think that this is very much indicative of President Trump just taking it in stride. It's water off a duck's back. And thank God for that, because we don't need any more professional finger lickers that stick their finger in the air to figure out what they say on that day, Joe.
Absolutely, John. It is. I mean, just think, and I've said this 100 times, I'll say it again, and I'll continue to say it. Just imagine Trump accomplishing nothing as president, but keep being there, just to be there to keep Hillary Clinton out. How much of a blessing that alone would have been, let alone the fact that Donald Trump is who he is and loves America and loves the American people and wants to better it. And, that is such a blessing. And he's not only paying lip service to that, he's actually putting his words and promises into action. And we couldn't, really, nobody's perfect. Nobody's going to be the perfect president. Trump has his issues. He's got an ego, and there's a lot of faults with him. But you couldn't ask for a better person in the time that's so important after the last two presidential administrations, Bush and Obama. How they pushed us towards the brink of just complete globalism and a I guess retraction of our Constitution. We're coming back to our foundations and our roots, which is what made us the country that was strong economically and great in the first place. So, it truly is a blessing, John. I don't know how else to say it. We are very fortunate, and we should be thankful every moment of every day that Hillary Clinton is not president, but also that Donald Trump is, and he is the person who he is.
Amen. That's something you can take to the bank, listeners. Even on your worst day, you can always be thankful that you know who the Lord God Almighty is. And if you don't, I highly recommend that you get with a Christian friend or family member, start reading the Word a little bit, or listen to it on your phone. It's very accessible, the Bible is nowadays. But you can always be thankful that you were born in America, the most prosperous country on the planet, that you have the opportunity to receive the gift of Christ, that Hillary Clinton is not president. That's almost like a single issue by itself. And then that President Donald Trump is. And it's interesting, but Joe, I'd like to propose a little piece of homework for us through the year 2018. Now, we will report and comment and analyze President Trump's victories and defeats as they come. However, we're going to put together a very comprehensive 2018 year in review that we'll have ready for December, and we'll just take a good hard look at President Trump's second year. And we might even, Joe, we could even make that a 2-hour show if we wanted to.
Yeah, we could. Absolutely. And we could do that, John. And today I want to talk a little bit also about what to expect in 2018 with the economy, with President Trump, and we can do that throughout the rest of this week. We can get into that also. But yeah, we can easily do the 2-hour show. You just mentioned Hillary Clinton, John, and I don't know if you saw this. I got a post up on Hagmann Report about this, but did you see what Chelsea Clinton was doing on New Year, who she was talking to on Twitter? Chelsea Clinton gave a warm holiday greeting to an unusual group when she wished the Church of Satan a Happy New Year in a tweet Tuesday. Now, Clinton, this article goes on to say, Clinton found herself in a Twitter conversation with the Church of Satan and model Chrissy Teigen, the restaurant Hooters, and various assorted accounts after she tweeted encouragement to Teigen. Now, what's interesting about this is, I don't know how many people are on Twitter, but when you're verified, you get a little blue check mark next to your name, and the Church of Satan is verified. So you got to ask the question, does Satan verify himself on Twitter? Or how does this work? Who verifies the Church of Satan? And I mean,
well,
what is this?
I guess you'd have to go back to Genesis chapter 1, verse 1 and start there. But it's an interesting point. And
how does this work? Does Satan call up the CEO of Twitter and say, "Hey, you're going to verify my church"?
Hey, the CEO of Twitter is Jack Dorsey, and there's a lot of questionable allegations against the man. I will not enumerate any of them now because I personally don't have what we would consider evidentiary proof. But with Jack Dorsey at the head of Twitter, I would say that he and Satan probably have a bat phone. But the other thing about Chelsea, Joe, and I want to get your opinion on this. She has for years been openly wearing an upside down cross around her neck. That is one of the great symbolic affronts to Jesus Christ. So I'm confused about Chelsea.
Oh, you mean like the Pope's upside down cross chair?
Yeah, that's another good example. And I actually had a girlfriend once who had an upside down cross tattoo, but I didn't understand any occult symbology back then. Anyway, I'm digressing. The point I want to make, or the question I want to ask you, Joe, is Chelsea Clinton was born into a Luciferian family with a bloodline that I think there's been very good work done trying to identify Bill Clinton's bloodline. Some people say that it's in the Cecil Rhodes, founder of the Rhodes Foundation bloodline, but others say that Chelsea Clinton is not even Bill Clinton's daughter, but rather Webster Hubbell's daughter.
I think that's true. If you look at the comparisons of Chelsea Clinton and Webster Hubbell, I don't think you can deny the similarities there. It's all there, right in the face, the nose, the lips, the ears.
Exactly, and that segues beautifully into the question as a whole, Joe. We need to have, and this is hard to do. Okay, this is hard to do. But we need to have a softened heart for adult victims like Chelsea Clinton, because in my humble opinion, and I'm stating this as my personal opinion alone, I believe she was born into a Luciferian family, and I've learned so much, Joe, over the last 2 years, I know you have too, about how human trafficking works, about how some parents engage in incestual sexual relations with their own children, and others actually pride themselves a step up on the immoral ladder, if you will, because they don't personally engage in sexual misconduct with their children, but rather they child swap with other friends or other members of their coven. So it makes sense. Chelsea Clinton could, in fact, be Webster Hubbell's daughter. She's wearing an upside down cross, and I have no great love for her, really, but at the same time, I was thinking about it this morning. I was blessed to be born into a Christian home, Joe. She was born into a Luciferian home.
No, you're right about that. But, we also know a lot of people who were born into those homes who have made it out to the other side. And Hillary Clinton still knows right from wrong. And she's an adult. She can make her own choices. And you can see her continued support, even fanatical support of Planned Parenthood, is evident of her faith. And I do believe we're well beyond what is even atheism or agnosticism. It's Satanism, what these people believe. And this is what we are going to continue to talk about. And it's so important that we understand this spiritual component of what we are up against in the world, that everything we see going around us. And all the power elite are satanic. This new world order is satanic, and it's evil. And we're going to talk about this a little bit, especially when we get into, John, the EU, what's been going on in Paris. Did you see the video of the lady cop who was beaten in the streets of Paris on New Year's Eve?
Oh, my goodness, Joe, I missed that one, but I do remember the optics out of mid-year last year where the female cops were unable to nab that perpetrator that just busted out the front windshield of their cruiser. I believe it was in Sweden. And there were 3 female cops who just were not ready to engage this male perpetrator. And a citizen came running out of camera right and tackled the guy. And once the Good Samaritan had the guy down, then the female cops were able to take control of the situation. That being said, it sounds like another incident here in France. Tell us about it, Joe.
Yeah, we're going to get into it. And just real quick on that, Hillary Clinton, Webster Hubbell is definitely Chelsea's father. And Bill Clinton does have a son, and his name is Danny Williams. And I do believe that to be the case. And who knows how, what other things are going on with the Clintons, Bill and Hillary Clintons. But in Paris, this is a crazy story. Paris police protests. Hundreds take to the streets in anti-cop hatred after New Year's Eve attack. Hundreds of French police officers took to the streets of Paris in protest at the rise in anti-cop hatred following the savage attack on 2 of their colleagues on New Year's Eve. There's a video, and I'm sure you can find it on YouTube. It's also on the express.co.uk. And the summary goes, the shocking footage of an unarmed female police officer and her boss being savagely beaten up by a gang of violent revelers in the Paris suburb in the early hours of Monday sparked a torrent of outrage after it was posted online by one of the alleged thugs. 2 officers were hospitalized. Injuries were broken nose, contusions and bruises, but they're going to make full recoveries. Even the president of France, Macron, said that we are going to find and punish those behind the cowardly and criminal lynching. But the police are out in the hundreds protesting this. They say police officers told the Associated Free Press they had taken to the streets to denounce the rise in anti-cop hatred. And one of the police officer spokesmen says that this job has been getting, worse and worse each year that goes by. He's been a cop for 28 years. And they're getting sick of this, the anti-cop hatred, which they allude to has taken rise as we've seen this forced mass migration. And John, we've seen this so many times. And I think Jihad, let me go over to Jihad Watch. I got it up here. There is nothing on the police attack maybe there is. On the police attack, it's just down a little further. But there's several other stories about the what's going on in all around the European Union. London, under its Muslim mayor, sharp rise in knife crime, gun crime, burglary, rape, and homicide. Also, Ireland, Muslim migrant stabs 3, killing 1, attacks cops with iron bar. In Sweden, there was an explosion yesterday. I don't believe anybody was killed. Germany, Muslim attacked several people with knife, calls 1 infidel. Was he arrested? No. He was then taken to a psychiatrist. So what is the European Union and Europe? What have they done to their nation states? And look at Paris. Paris, they have turned over, and this goes for all of the European Union. They've turned over their security, or they've turned their society upside down, and has forced this migration without any questions asked and no real concern for security for their citizens. And it's crazy. These people, we've seen this huge increase of crimes from stabbings, sexual assaults, terror attacks in all the European countries. And what does the media do? They continue to defend, the Islam migrants. They continue to basically deny that it even exists, that these problems even exist. And they're putting their own people at risk of physical and sexual and mental terror to bend over backwards for the satanic elite who are organizing these mass migrations in order to fulfill, John, what we've talked about many times, Albert Pike's Third World War. And it fits if you the pieces fit, but it's getting more crazy. We're starting to see some pushback in Sweden. People have been taking to the streets. It'll be interesting to see what happens in 2018. I think the European Union is in for a big surprise from their citizens.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that the key takeaway from that commentary, Joe, from your commentary, is pushback. It has begun. It is building. And the people are motivated to protect their wives, their daughters, and one another. I'd like to make 2 points quickly. Listeners, keep an eye on Poland this year. Now, you have to be careful, exercise discernment. If you watch a video about Poland's internal politics from, say, Vice, for example, on YouTube, it's going to sound like they're a bunch of crazy skinhead nationalists. But
no, they were having the Jesus parades. Did you see that?
Yes, that's where I was going. Absolutely. Is Poland has re-embraced the Christian faith. And Joe, I wish I could refer our listeners, but it's been a month or two since I saw it. There was a fascinating map somewhere in the blogosphere. It was one of the platforms, Joe, that you and I trust and use often. I just can't remember which one. However, it showed the number of churches, Christian churches, active in the various countries of the EU. And then it showed, like the active Christian churches, I think, were a green dot. Then it showed the Muslim Islamic terror attacks in the same countries with a red dot. And Joe, it was absolutely staggering. It was stupefying. The entire EU had red dots everywhere, very few green dots. Poland, on the other hand, was practically covered in green and I think had 2 red dots across the entire country. So, of course, the implication is there is no such thing as a spiritual vacuum. If you kick the Lord God Almighty and you kick the gift of salvation through Christ out of your country, and it starts in your home. You kick Christ out of your home, then pretty soon it's out of your city. Look at Oklahoma City, for example. Whoever thought they would flip out so bad in the last couple of years? Poland is reignited with the Christian faith. And I'll even take it a step further, the map aside. Russia is too. In fact, Joe, I read a fascinating article maybe a month, 6 weeks ago that President Vladimir Putin actually has a program that gives free Bibles away to anyone who doesn't have one or cannot afford one. What an enormous miracle compared to the Soviet Union of 30 years ago. Bottom line is, if you kick Jesus out, the devil's coming in.
No, you're exactly right, John. And I want to apologize real quick. I keep getting my throat. I don't know what's going on, but it's messing up with the way I'm trying to talk. I keep getting phlegm in my throat. I don't know if I'm getting sick or what, but it's it's interfering with me talking properly. But anyway, no, you're exactly right. And I saw that yesterday too, John. I did not see the map, but I saw the statistics of what Poland has been doing, and they've doubled down. They've told George Soros, they've told the EU to shove their forced migration policies. They don't care. EU is threatening to put economic sanctions on them. I think it was even suggested that troops go on the border of Poland because they won't take the refugees in. They won't meet the quota that the European Union has set for them. And for what? Why would they want to destroy themselves? Look what they've done to Sweden. Look what they've done to France. Look what they've done to London. Look what they've done to Germany and all these other places. Literally, you have no-go zones. You have, tiny fractions of Sharia law. You have, the roving gangs of, I don't know, what do you call them? Sharia patrols. You have, this is the clash of civilizations, and intently or purposefully trying to bring this violence about. What else would what would be the other reason? What other group of people do you know can be forced into your country, given welfare, commit, countless acts of savage sexual and other terror attacks on the population, and then be protected by the media, be protected by the government, given more money, even laws implemented against the citizens who speak out against their behavior? It's crazy. But this is what Europe has done to itself.
Let me ask you a question, and then maybe we can take this and move into Iran for a couple minutes. But based on your years of investigative experience, Joe, and I'm borrowing this 100% from Doug Hagmann's commentary of about 18 months ago, give or take, he spoke about now, of course, these laws vary state by state, and I wish, as a side note, that we could just make a single set of laws for all 50 states. However, the concept was defense of life, and Doug Hagmann essentially said that you have a right to defend your own life, but also to defend life. And the question I want to ask you, Joe, is: do you think, personally, I would have no problem if I saw a female cop being assaulted, especially by numerous male perpetrators. If it was one, I'd probably go in physically with my fist. But if it was multiple people, honestly, I'd probably just shoot them. Any comment, Joe?
Absolutely, John. Well, I know I definitely wouldn't let it stand. I would do whatever I could. It depends on what was happening. I guess, you can't just go up and shoot. If a guy has a cop on the ground and, he's like punching her or something, and she's still alive and she's fighting back, I don't know that that's grounds to shoot him. But, you definitely want to go upside his head and stop him from assaulting the woman. But, yeah, the point is that you have to intervene. And I think it's time. We see people, especially with what we see with homeless people, how they're mostly ignored. Well, the same mentality, for some reason, are in so many Americans and Western men to their fight or flight response. It's like there's a new one, ignore. And maybe that's part of the flight response. I don't know, John. But shouldn't that kick in? Why does that not kick in? Why do we see, a man, sucker punch an old lady and everybody standing around does nothing? What is that?
Yeah. See, here's the thing, and this is not to be some kind of internet tough guy here, but if I saw a man sucker punch an old woman, I'd run his butt down if I had to chase him 3 blocks, and then I'd bring some heavy-duty tribulation down on that guy. And I think a lot of men would. Joe, there's many answers to that question. One of them may simply be some of these younger guys, 20s, early 30s maybe, they grew up their entire lives with what? With GMO foods, an inordinate amount of soy, which has been connected to a definite increase in estrogen.
But, John, we've all grown up with this when you're our age. I'd say anybody under 60, maybe even earlier than that, has grown up in the same way. Maybe it's more about the society, too, at the same time, or the fact that, I think what a lot of it has to do with the feminization of men. When we were kids, I played outside. Rain, sleet, snow, didn't matter. Every day for hours. We played football, baseball, basketball, hide and go seek tag. 100 different things.
Army, BMX,
we were never
fight,
inside. I got in all my initial fights when I was 10, 11, out there playing in the neighborhood, and that's just the way it was. And you grew up, you got tough, and that's that. But you don't see that anymore. Everybody's inside on their phones, on their computers, on their TVs, on their screens, and they're not getting that real world interaction. So maybe people just don't know how to react in those situations because they've never been in them. I've been in some crazy situations that have taught me a lot of things, from people trying to murder other people to just all kinds of things. So I don't know. It has a lot to do with everything, I think, and it's unfortunate to see people who will stand there and do nothing in the face of danger or to help or stand up for somebody else. It's really unfortunate, and that should never be.
No, it shouldn't. And what's even worse is they whip out their iPhone or their Droid and they film it so they can put it on Facebook and get a bunch of likes. And I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but listeners, do yourself a favor in 2018. Don't allow yourself to become beholden to or even addicted to a thumbs up or a like or followers on Twitter. None of that at the end of the day really matters.
John,
it's just, go ahead.
No, not to cut you off. I just want to make sure I mention this because we were just talking about the Islamization of Europe and how detrimental of an effect this has had, and we did not talk about this. Okay,
let's move that direction.
Did you see this? AfD politician censored under new German hate speech law for anti-Muslim tweet. Her name is Beatrix von Storch, a leading figure in the Alternative for the Germany Party. She's one of the first hit by a new hate speech law on social media. Critics say the legislation opens the way for censorship by internet companies. So this is a top lawmaker from the anti-immigration Alternative for Germany Party. She was blocked from Twitter and Facebook on Monday after slamming the Cologne police for sending a New Year's tweet in Arabic. The incident caused the AfD to lash out further and criticize censorship as a controversial new German social media law known as NetzDG that went into effect on January 1st in a bid to clamp down on online hate speech. Now, the Cologne police tweeted a New Year's greetings in Arabic, and in Cologne, this was the scene 2 years ago of mass sexual assaults on New Year's Eve, in which most of the suspects were described as North African and Arab origin. And she tweeted out, "What the hell is happening in this country? Why is an official police site tweeting in Arabic? Do you think it is to appease the barbaric, gang-raping hordes of Muslim men?" wrote Beatrix von Storch, the deputy leader of the AfD's party. The tweet was later deleted after Twitter froze her account and informed her she had violated hate speech rules. Her account was shut down for 12 hours. The Cologne police on Monday said they filed a criminal complaint against Strach for the hate speech. The lawmaker then upped the ante, writing a sarcastic post once her account was reopened. She also announced that her Facebook account had been censored due to hate speech complaint. Now, what's interesting is the Cologne police criminal complaint, here's what they're doing. They're going to go to state prosecutors, having her parliamentary immunity revoked, and then they're going to indict her for hate speech.
You know, if memory serves, Cologne, again, 2 years ago, isn't that the city where the mayor came out and essentially chastised and even criminalized the victims, suggesting that they need to not wear such short skirts, and that by their actions they wound up in some twisted default mindset as being responsible, and I'm saying that in finger quotes, for their own rapes or assaults. Do you recall that reportage from 2 years ago? I believe that was Cologne.
I'm looking right now to see if this is Cologne. But yeah, I do remember. I do know what you're saying, and let's see here. I'll find out here from the search.
While you look, I'll just drop this piece of commentary. We know from Ephesians chapter 6, verses 12 through 18, that we war not with flesh and blood, but with powers and principalities. So I've always interpreted that, and then of course the subsequent verses go on to describe our pieces of spiritual armor. Every Christian needs to be familiar with Ephesians chapter 6. But
John, you're right. Excuse me. January 5th, 2016. This is this is from the Independent out of Europe. Mayor Raker says on the gang assaults. Mayor says women should have a code of conduct to prevent future assaults. Sorry about that. Let me mute that out. The mayor of Cologne said today, this was 1 year ago, that women should adopt a code of conduct to prevent future assaults at a crisis meeting following the sexual attack of women by 1,000 men on New Year's Eve. Then it goes on to say it is important to prevent such incidents from ever happening again. And then she goes on to talk about exactly a dress code, maintaining an arm's length distance from strangers, not wearing short skirts, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, and this is what they do. This is what they do. And it's insane. Well, they're blaming the victim.
They're under, to go back to Ephesians 6 quickly, they are under the delusion, powerful delusion, toxic delusion, satanic delusion of the principality that has been assigned by Satan himself to that given region. And I hope I'm interpreting the scripture correctly. Listeners, please feel free to email either Joe or myself if you have a different interpretation. But nonetheless, we know that there's the demonic entity is the Prince of Persia, and we're going to speak about Iran here in a moment. I know Joe's got a piece, and so do I. We can clearly see from the 1960s and early 1970s what happened to Tehran and to Iran as a whole when Sharia law, when Islam took over the state. And that, in my opinion, Joe, is that Ephesians 6 principality consolidating power under what we know from Matthew and from the demonic possessed man in the tombs, that they are legion. And that's the consolidation of legion under this principality that then answers to Satan himself. I don't remember which.
I agree, John. I mean, we know that there are, principalities and spiritual wickedness in high places. The Bible is very specific about that. And we know that there are territorial and geographic boundaries to these principalities. And it is in Scripture, it's all throughout Scripture when it is referring to spiritual warfare. And that is a very important element of this. And John, I just want to make sure that we mention this, though, at the same time where we have the spiritual, and this is what drives, when we talk about, what we're seeing here, as I said before, is the clash of civilizations. But the people who are the citizens of these nations, of Germany, of France, and so on, are the ones who are being bulldozed over, while the forced migrants are giving special privileges. And we're seeing this is so crazy with this political leader in Germany who's running for president is being censored and now is going to have criminal charges brought against her for her criticism of Islam and the sexual assaults that have been seen in the huge increases of these crimes. And she's getting criminal charges brought against her. So how does this end? Are people going to be incarcerated in mass when another terror attack happens and the people are saying, oh yes, another Muslim terror attack? Are these people going to be carted off to jail under hate speech laws? This is not going to end well. This is only going to bring more violence. And what feeds that is that spiritual darkness, that regional principality, John, that you're talking about, and that spirit that flows through man, and how man acts on that and implements these laws and puts these crazy policies into place and creates this whole atmosphere which generates more fear, more death, more violence, which feeds that same dark principality.
Exactly. And, history is replete with concrete examples of this. I'm not going to throw down a history lesson right now, but I'll just mention quickly that as these Western European nations, many of whom have been traditional and great allies of the United States in some of the biggest conflagrations in world history, but as they have slowly secularized, as they have accepted numerous things that are an abomination to the Lord, as these things have occurred, what do we see happening? I always reference this, but it's so important. Deuteronomy chapter 28, first third of the chapter is the blessings a nation receives when it's under the command, when it's being obedient to God Almighty. The second 2/3 of the chapter are all of the punishments that a nation will receive. And Joe, it says right there that your borders, I'm paraphrasing obviously, but your borders will be overran, that the low will be made high and the high will be made low. And that last 2/3 of Deuteronomy 28 is staggering, because every Christian listening to this program should take those last 2/3 of Deuteronomy. We'll read the entire chapter because you need to see both sides of the chapter itself. However, that should be used as a template by which to measure how we're doing as the United States, particularly now that we're just a little over a year into actually just under a year into the presidency of Donald Trump. Joe, we've got to keep our side of the street clean, and we've got to make some significant changes in this country. And two of the biggest ones, in my opinion, we have got to stop butchering babies, and we've got to stop projecting all this military force around the world without even having the gentleman's inclination, to make an understatement, of declaring war. We haven't declared war since December 8th, 1941, the day after Pearl Harbor. And yet how many men and women and assets and weapon systems have we sent everywhere, almost 900 bases across the globe. Joe, I don't want to get on a rant. We've got to stop killing babies. We've got to stop pretending to be the world's muscle. It's just got to stop, or we're going to be in big trouble with the Lord.
No, you're absolutely right. But the reason it's so important to point out what is happening in Europe, what is happening all over the EU, and even the differences between a country like France or Germany versus Poland is because this is exactly what they're trying to do here. And thankfully, we still have the Constitution. We still have the First Amendment. And I don't know if you saw this. This kind of ties in.
And the second.
And the second. This kind of ties in a weird way. There was a journalist, maybe not a journalist, a TV talking head who stated that the Trump calling the media fake news was an attack not only on the media, but on her First Amendment rights. And I thought that was pretty funny. But John, did you see what Trump tweeted out about the media and about the fake news media awards that he was going to do this year?
Oh, I so love it when President Trump calls them out on their plastic-headed fakery. Let us have it, Joe.
All right, what I'm going to do is pull the tweet up right now, and this was issued this morning. This has the media in a huge tailspin. Trump to present dishonest and corrupt media awards. This from Politico. After a year of berating the mainstream media, President Donald Trump tweeted Tuesday that he will be presenting awards Monday to what he considers to be the worst of the worst. I will be announcing the most dishonest and corrupt media awards of the year on Monday at 5 o'clock. Subjects will discover dishonesty and bad reporting in various categories from the fake news media. Stay tuned. And as Mark Dice says, this might be one of the only award shows that will be worth watching as the Trump continues his crusade against the media. And I absolutely love it. This is one of my favorite things. This probably is one of my most favorite things about Donald Trump is his ability to troll and trigger the media. The media in their reactions to Trump, specifically when he talks about and calls them out for being fake news, their response is priceless. It's like their collective brains melt down in their heads and they can't formulate a logic, a common sense thought or have any logic or reason. All that goes out the window. And then they start babbling about how they're still relevant and how they're, not fake and they're truthful and their integrity is untarnished and how Trump's mentally deranged and they're the only sane ones. It's so awesome to watch. So,
I love it.
How will this be presented? That's unclear, but I'm going to be keeping my eye open Monday at 5 o'clock.
Oh, I love it. You know what would make a really fashionable award would be to take an old circa 1950s mic, those big, beautiful silver microphones, make that the award, if you will, but have it look like that microphone's melting like a candle onto its base. That would be John, a perfect award for these.
Can you imagine? I mean, let's think about this for a minute. Any president ever in history. So when we're older and we have kids, grandkids, or whatever, we can say, "Yeah, I remember when Donald Trump was president and he called the media out and had the fake news awards." I mean, that's historic. That is so awesome. The media is so dishonest, so corrupt. They are the bottom of the barrel. They're the worst of the worst.
Absolutely.
And they get called out every day, and it's so fun to watch. And what other president do you know who will ever expose the media for who they truly are? It'll never happen again.
It's great to have a front row seat as we see the as yet written history just turning on its axis. I mean, this has been an enormous flipping of the globalist script, and again, to revert back to our opening thoughts, it is a miracle. And we at the Hagmann Report will continue to call out the fake news as much as necessary, which will probably be every broadcast night this year to one degree or another. That being said, Joe, I had an article that I was going to delve into from Christian Science Monitor, but I'm actually choosing to drop this on the floor today. I'll just give the headline. This is from Christian Science Monitor, posted today. What has brought Iranians into the streets? In a word, the economy. Now, I do not disagree with that premise by terrestrial definition, but I would suggest to any thinking man or woman, expand that definition to what Joe and I spoke about a moment ago. The problem with Iran is, bottom line, Iran is not a Christian state. That's the problem.
Yeah, I mean, that is a problem. But what is this really about? Why are these protests happening? We covered this a little bit yesterday. This from the Washington Times. Why the working poor uprising in Iran may have the power to topple the hardline regime. The wave of violent protests churning across Iran differs dramatically from the last major uprising that rocked the country in 2009 and could spiral out of control if the regime moves too quickly toward military-style tactics to crush the unrest. While the abortive Green Revolution 8 years ago was driven mainly by the children of wealthy political elite in Tehran in the wake of a questionable election, the spontaneous protests this time around are unfolding across the country and driven by what analysts describe as the working poor, a segment of the population that has little to lose in the face of a crackdown by the regime. The supreme leader of Iran, Ayatollah al-Khamenei, who has treaded lightly since the protests began last week, weighed in for the first time Tuesday by claiming the protests were being spurred by the enemies of Iran. His remarks came in the wake of harsh comments from President Trump on Twitter on the government's handling of the popular protests, amid reports of hundreds of arrests and 21 deaths caused by the unrest. Now, what we see with Trump versus when Obama was president and the uprising in 2009 happened is Obama was on the side of the Iranian regime, on the side of Ayatollah al-Khamenei. He helped protect the terrorist state and the terrorist funding. And not only that, he actually financed, Obama did, some of that terrorism with U.S. dollars in the form of ransom payments and, the nuclear deal. But anyway, we've seen Susan Rice, a former Obama administration official, and Obama himself and others tell Trump to not speak up for the side of the protesters, to keep his silence. And in stark contrast to the Obama administration, Trump has done nothing of the sort, telling Iran that they better be careful how they respond to these protests and that the world is watching. Now, what is the working poor's beef in Iran? Apparently, the government is wasting money, hoarding it for themselves as the prices of all supplies have risen astronomically, the report says, from food to energy to the price of living. And now it is hitting people where it hurts. And you have this backlash because the people cannot afford to continue to live like this. So this will not end well for the Iranian regime.
I'm in complete agreement with you there. I'm picking that article by Christian Science Monitor up off the floor because I want to add this to your analysis, Joe. This is about 2/3 of the way into a very well-written piece, by the way. And let me give credit to the writer quickly as well. It's from Scott Peterson, who's a staff writer over at CS Monitor. But he notes as a sub-headline, "No to Gaza, no to Lebanon." Quote, "One target for protesters' chants has been Iran's years-long and expensive projection of power abroad, especially in Syria, Iraq, and Lebanon, where Iran has spent billions of dollars propping up Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, creating Shiite militias in Iraq to fight Islamic State, parenthetically ISIS, and ensuring the military prowess of its vital ally, the Lebanese Shiite movement, Hezbollah." Joe, this goes back to something we learned a couple years ago. This regional miasma of conflagration in the Middle East is a mess because the United States is arguably fighting both sides of the battle to one degree or another, and we're putting good, decent, regular American men and women right in harm's way. And yet at the same time, be it through finance, weapons, or both, we're fighting. It's amazing. It's like we're fighting ourselves, but over in Syria and over in Iraq. Now, what I'd love to see sweep the world, and I think, Joe, this spark might have been touched to the fuse. Let's hope so. I would love to see nationalism in its productive, in its original, by its original definition, which is to say, more power to the Iranians in the street. Pull that money and pull those resources out of Syria. I don't mean to sound cold-hearted about this, but we should let the Syrians figure out what they're going to do in Syria, and then we should be there for some human aid and resources. and make sure people are fed and they get some medical care and so forth. Personally, and I know people are going to send me emails saying I'm a libtard or whatever, which couldn't be further from the truth. But Joe, I would much rather they spend my tax money on repairing some little Syrian kids who've been hurt in the conflict, or feeding the people who are over there starving. And that being said, I'd like to see the United States pull almost all of these foreign bases back into the country. Let's consolidate. Let's put our resources elsewhere. I just think that I'd love to see in 2018 is for countries to basically, when it comes to nation building, mind our own business.
Well, yes and no, John. I agree with you there. But, strategically, I used to believe that we should pull all of our people out of the military bases and remove some of the military bases and get them out of where they are. But strategically, I think it would be wise to leave them there. I mean, we have bases all over the world, which puts us in positions to be able to act anywhere in the world if need be. And I don't think we want to lose that edge that we have with our strategic locations and whatnot. I'm sure there are many bases that we can pull back from, maybe even lower personnel from. But I wouldn't advocate for closing them all down.
No, I wouldn't advocate for closing them all down by no means. But I bet if you and I had the privilege and the honor of sitting down with President Trump for a couple hours, I bet just between the three of us, with no military high brass involved at all, we could probably go over the global map and figure out a way to save hundreds of billions of dollars simply by saying, okay, this is redundant, this over here is superfluous, this over here is antagonistic to a nation we really don't need to antagonize. Keeping in mind that I read reports between 7 and 11 carrier battle groups. We know minimum we have 7, which is the most forceful projection of military might in history. At the end of the day, Joe, what I'd really like to see is just for the United States to be the same type of benevolent global neighbor that we were right after World War II. Imagine this. We fought the Nazis for 3.5 years. Huge battles, D-Day, the Battle of the Bulge, the Hurtgen Forest, Kasserine Pass. I mean, we fought these huge battles against this horrific Nazism. And as soon as the smoke settled, we're over there airlifting food and services and medical supplies to the West Berliners, of course, the famous Berlin airlift. So I'd like to see our country get back to some of that. Hey, we're here when you need us. You have a hurricane wipe out an enormous part of your country or your region. We're going to get those desalination plants there. We're going to get boots on the ground to help you recover. But I really would like to see us project, perhaps, Joe, the iron fist in a velvet glove would be better, if that makes sense.
No, I agree, John. And just looking at the just looking at the show clock here, we got about 5 minutes left. I don't know I know we had a little plan of what we wanted to get into, John. And maybe we should spend the last 5 minutes talking about what we discussed at the beginning of the show or before the show.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I'll just set it up, Joe, and then you can take us out. Listeners, if you didn't hear our first broadcast on the Hagmann Report last night, January 2nd, 2018, please go back and archive on YouTube or Blog Talk Radio and do so. First 2 hours, great news and analysis, old school Hagmann and Hagmann Report with Doug and Joe. But in hour 3, we had a dear friend of the program. She's been on twice, Tracy Diaz, better known as Tracy Beans, the citizen journalist and YouTuber. And she and Joe had a very interesting discussion. It got passionate at times, but it was an interesting discussion about the whole QAnon thing. Now, to Joe's credit,
she did her best to try to explain this to me, and I guess I didn't ask the right questions, and I'm still not satisfied. And it's nothing. I mean, she did a great job.
Well, to your credit, you read an enormous portion of the PDF that's available on the brand new Hagmann Report forum, which is accessible to all of our patrons via Patreon at the $5 level and above. Is that correct, Joe? It's the $5 level that allows access to the forum. $10 level. Is it 10? Okay, so for $10 a month, you can access
about most forums price, John, is $10 a month.
Perfect. And Doug Hagmann over the New Year's weekend compiled a 200 plus page PDF of the entire Q saga. Joe, why don't you take it from there and take us out today?
Well, yeah, and I guess I did read some of these Q posts. I just have not seen the PDF or go through it until last night. And, okay, I see, I see why so many people are buying into this stuff. And I guess what I need to clarify is that a lot of what he writes are not claims and predictions of things that are going to happen, but more, it puts into context a lot of what the alternative media has been talking about and focusing on for so long. So it ties in a whole bunch of accurate information, 9/11 stuff, corruption stuff, deep state stuff, stuff about who's who in the world under the Bush administration and Obama, and who owns what companies and what banks are whose. There's a lot of information in here, but I still am even more today bothered by some of the things I read in here. For example, I yesterday asked Tracy Beans if Podesta being indicted or under arrest came from Q, and she said no, it didn't. Well, I found that it does, and at least that's what it says here. And there are several posts which say, where is it here? Podesta indicted, Huma indicted, Hillary Clinton's plane, has a military escort, and all these claims, and there are little bits and pieces in these claims that are inside of packets of other truthful and relevant information. But my problem is a lot of some of these claims, they're all in the forms of questions. Every statement is ended with a question mark. So are they even claims? But my problem is the most effective form of disinformation or propaganda is that which is covered by mostly truth and some lies interjected in the very important parts, or a bunch of lies with some truth in it. Either way, is that what we're seeing here? There is something to this, because some of these claims that he has made are not accurate, or some of what people come away with from what he says, those claims are not accurate. And is this just a bunch of truth with some lies in there to keep people hopeful? I don't know. It's very interesting. There's a lot of information here, a lot of very important information, a lot of connections that he makes, or this Q makes, that are right and are very important and are things we should know and should be looking at. There is some semblance of inside information, yet at the same time, one or two pictures that could have been stolen from a hack that show, somebody within 20 feet of inside the White House near the president is not going to convince me. It's not enough to convince me that it's authentic. And here's a claim. Here, I got what I'm looking for here. Where is John Podesta? Where is Tony Podesta? Podesta plane has a military escort. Tag. It is being diverted. Forced down. This will be leaked soon. Watch the news. Have faith. Why is this relevant? This is, the post. And then what? Nothing. So where is the, Podesta's plane being brought down, and where's the news of this? But then again, you see other posts.
Let me interject quickly. A very valid point you make there. This idea of tailing the planes, forcing the planes down. I'm with you on that point, Joe, for sure. Bottom line, where is the proof? Please continue.
Yeah, where is the proof? And then some of the stuff, like they say, he mentioned Saudi Arabia and he gets into the 9/11 stuff and the funding and who was allowed to leave on 9/11. All that is stuff we've all talked about for a long time. And we've had Stan and Joel Richardson, John, as you reminded me this morning, on our show talking about Saudi Arabia well before November 5th and 4th, talking about Mohammed bin Salem and his potential consolidation for power. So by this Q starting to talk about the Saudi Arabia a day before they started to consolidate power is not a proof that he knew that the princes were going to be arrested just because he mentioned it. I don't know. I just, that was probably not the best or most articulate way of putting it, but the outro music's playing, so we got to end. But I'm going to continue to read this document. I'm going to continue to analyze this stuff and try to formulate my thoughts more accurately so I can share what I'm thinking with you guys. John, it was a great show. We covered a lot of ground, and we'll continue to get into this tomorrow and Friday.
Amen. Great show. Love you all.
All right, we'll be back tomorrow.
The Hagmann Daily Show is brought to you by the Hagmann Report. Tune in to the Hagmann Report weekdays, 7 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. For more information, go to HagmannReport.com. That's HagmannReport.com.